Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. We have some dev Q&A. There's going to be a few of these, and we are starting with none other than Jonathan. So Jonathan, it's been a pretty exciting start to the day.
Absolutely. I mean, it was much more exciting for me up on stage there, man. It's it's quite a thing.
It is quite a thing. I think people seem very happy with what they've
Está
heard.
mirando el chat en el
I
móvil.
really hope so. Yeah, like there was a huge amount of work that went into getting all that stuff sorted out, and yeah, I'm definitely glad it went okay. Apart from the minor death incident, but should be all right.
That's part of Path of Exile.
Absolutely. I should hope so. Anyway.
Well, soon enough, people here at Exilecon will get to play it a little bit. We'll have some gameplay showcases even right after this, actually, with Zizaran. That should be pretty fun. But first, I personally had a few questions about PoE 2, and hopefully those will answer some questions that you have. And if not, again, there will be more dev interviews throughout the event. All right, why don't we kick it off here? So we saw that PoE 2 in the demo, it was a little bit slower gameplay paced than what people experience if they play Path of Exile 1 right now.
Right.
But from what I've seen in the gameplay showcases, you guys generally try to slow it down for the purpose of the showcase.
That's true. That's true.
So what is the goal, I guess, is the question. So do we want to change Path of Exile 2 pacing versus Path of Exile 1?
So to be honest, it will be a little bit slower, but kind of not at the 50. Sorry to get technical, but not at the 50th percentile. Like I think that part of the issue is in PoE 1 is that there's so many multiplicative mechanics that go on that like at the sort of 95th percentile, like the top end of player, you get this like absolute ridiculousness with like 600 projectiles per second and that sort of shit. And it's like, well, it's like 600 projectiles per second, it's like you just can't see fucking anything, and so you don't have any ability to respond to boss mechanics. Like I don't think it's as fun as when you actually have, like 60 projectiles per second or something like that, you know what I mean? Like we still want it to be ridiculous, it's just that we don't want it to be like at the very top end, as ridiculous as it is. And it's honestly just so that you actually get some interesting counterplay with the bosses. You get some more like stuff going on there. And so that's kind of a thing that we'd like to do.
Y los bosses por fin se paran quietos, tío, no como maitos ahí otros que están todo el rato spameando habilidades.
So yeah, like basically we were using like a lot, it's in the demos as well here. There's a lot of like two-handed weapons, which are a bit slower, just once again to sort of get the idea of the...
Well, that's what I use.
Yeah, fair enough. But it's like, basically we try to show off the game because it looks nicer for like when you're, especially when you're trying to appeal to a new audience. You want to show it off as best as you can. The bit slower just makes it look a bit nicer. But I mean, at the same time, we're seeing that we've still got like all the triggering mechanics and like triple casting and all that sort of stuff. Like all that stuff really will allow you to do the kind of ridiculousness that you expect from PoE.
Sí, Jonathan habla muy
I
rápido.
certainly wouldn't want you to like. I still want a player to feel like, oh, I totally broke the game with this bullshit that I'm doing here. Like it needs to feel like you still broke it, just not actually break it. Like I don't want to
El triple cast.
Like they sometimes.
Well, if it's just for a little while, it's worth the moment.
Right.
A big one is I heard the audience kind of wooing when they saw gold dropping off of the
el oro.
Yeah, we never even mentioned it at the keynote, and it's funny because it's like it's not exactly like some big headline feature of oh, there's gold in this game. Who's ever heard of that, right? It's obviously it is what it is. Of all the things that we did in PoE 2, I would say that's like the only like every other decision we make, we're like, does this feel like PoE or does it feel like not PoE? And like the gold thing is probably the only thing where we're like, this isn't really a PoE thing, and we acknowledge that. But at the same time, I think it is actually important to make the drop system better. Like okay, it's like fundamentally you have this constraint. If you're going to kill a monster and it drops nothing, it feels like shit. And then at the same time, if you have to drop something, you can't obviously drop a rare on every frickin' monster you kill, so therefore you have to be able to drop something. And honestly, gold does actually work. Like there's a reason games have it. But the important thing that we don't want to do with gold is have an economy based around it. Like it is supposed to not be something that like people. I don't expect players to be trading with gold to each other. They're going to be trading with other currency items as you would hope they would in PoE. Like that's our thing.
Well, I guess the follow-up question would be, what do you want someone to use gold for?
So the main thing they should be using gold for is fixing, like, especially during campaign, fixing deficiencies in their build. Like, if you need this thing to be able, if you need like the right resistance, if you need something like that, we've overhauled the shop very significantly to make it so that there's much more likely to be things inside the shop that will be able to deal with problems that you have. Like, if you're fighting a boss, you don't have the resistances, you should be able to deal with that very quickly. There's also rares that you can find in there sometimes for certain things, and we also make it so that it doesn't change every level. Like, you get new stuff getting added to the shop that sticks around for a while. so that you get a chance to actually save up and buy it if you see something that you want. And there's also gambling. So like by gambling I mean like buying a base type where you don't know what rare it will be, and you will be able to get units that way.
That's similar to Ruthless with Gold.
Absolutely. Well, there's a reason we were testing this, right? We're like, see what's going on here. Like, we want to see if it actually works, like when players are exposed to it. So that was absolutely a test. We were like, let's see, can PoE even work with gold in it? Like, and there's been some changes since we did the Ruthless with Gold test, but yeah, it was just interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, personally, I actually really liked Ruthless with Gold.
Right.
The one thing I didn't like very much was the currency conversions through the vendors was disabled.
Yes.
So I was sitting on hundreds of jewelers, but I just needed like 3 fusings.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely been tweaks since then, and there's definitely great feedback. Like, it's one of the whole reason we ran Ruthless with Gold was to absolutely see like what sort of shakes out. It's very hard to do those kinds of tests in the office because it's like the amount of play time you'd have to like work out whether the economy is going to work is pretty extensive. So
I'm gonna spin it all the way different outside of mechanics on this one. My first time in New Zealand was coming to Exilecon the first time around, and it was a wonderful experience. And it was really the first time that I realized just how much of New Zealand themes and culture kind of exist, at least in part, in Path of Exile.
For sure, yeah.
And it was such a wonderful thing to see. Like, I would go to a museum, and then I'd see something that was quite similar to what I've been playing for years in Path of Exile. So how forwarded is this theming in Path of Exile 2?
I would say even more so. I mean, the Kurui have an entire act about them. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Karui.
It's obviously, we're inspired by the stuff we see, and honestly, it's really nice to be able to, like take inspiration from what we see around us. Like, we never see this stuff in games. There are islands which like are full of like the sort of New Zealand vegetation that I guess Americans don't tend to see very often. So it's really nice to have all that stuff and make all that stuff, and like it's just great to have some of that stuff going on.
That's awesome. Back to a few mechanics, and again, I want to reiterate that our information right now is just what we saw in the gameplay highlight in the presentation. We might see a little bit more from the players around, but we saw that in the presentation there were just, I think, 3 life flasks and 2 mana flasks on each of the characters. Is that just because they're kind of low level, or is there going to be more of a focus on the life and mana flasks?
I mean, I don't know that I'd still call it a focus, but at the same time, we do want to make sure that life and mana flasks aren't useless. Like, they should actually have a purpose. There was some changes to utility flasks because we wanted to make sure that, let me get this exactly right, we tended to remove things that lasted for a duration from utility flasks, so the utility flasks are more responsive to the situation. So for example, if you are currently burning, then if you use a flask to get rid of that, then it will give you, it will remove the burning and make you immune for a while. But if you don't have burning on you right now, it doesn't do that. So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing to sort of make it so that there's some like counterplay going on with it, rather than just I just have it on all the time. It's effectively just another effect on my character.
Well, you have that kind of as the affix system in PoE 1 right now.
Yes, sorry, I'm not up to date with PoE 1, so
I think generally that system is pretty well received.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
Right. That's exactly the kind of stuff, though. That so that change, if it's in PoE 1 now, that was definitely a like PoE 2 thing, and I think they took it. Like, so the thing is so just because people probably don't know this, I'm not involved in PoE 1 at all at this point. I'm game director on PoE 2. I'm focusing on that.
Yeah, Jonathan is full PoE
obviously about designs that we're doing, and he definitely, I suspect that some of those things filter their way down.
So that's how you're doing flasks.
Exactly.
Right.
Take
that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So Chris is in charge of PoE 1, and he sort of making the decisions there.
I wanted to kind of double down on the mana situation a bit, because we have the separation of mana for skills and mana for reservation with auras.
Absolutely.
And spirit.
What kind of focus are you going to put on mana? Like, if you just took away auras from being mana-based in PoE 1 right now, everyone just has way too much mana for everything.
Exactly. So we will, costs will absolutely go up. And part of the balance problem that we have is you pretty much just can't really balance skills with mana use particularly easily in PoE 1.
Los triggers.
Because there's just this expectation that everyone's going to reserve as much as they can. And the thing is, because reservation exists, it means that people are going to always push the line as far as they can, and then they start complaining if then skills cost too much.
Of course.
That they don't have any freaking mana. And it's like, well, yeah, but so you'd think you'd be saying, oh yeah, well, that's your problem. We've realized a much more sort of, I guess, once you learn about our player psychology, you realize that no, you have to actually, if you want that not to happen, like people always spend down to the line, so you have to do something about it. So Spirit is the response to that, and it means that now you have an amount of Spirit to spend. If you want to make trade-offs on your build, then those trade-offs should be made in your passive tree, rather than being a sort of like thing that you're doing that. So you still get to make that choice of like, do I want do I want to get more mana on the tree or not? There's also the scepters. Scepters give Spirit as well, and that's how that escalates.
Oh,
so,
los cetros dan
build,
Spirit.
it's very likely, you don't have to, but it's very likely you'll want to use scepters to help with that.
Well, as a minion enjoyer, it wasn't said for more than a split second, but I caught that minions are going to reserve Spirit.
They do, yes. That's so you'll be able to have more. So if you want more minions, get more Spirit. That's the way. So we're trying mostly to avoid having like hard limits on like number of zombies. You can just cast as many zombies as you have Spirit to cast them. So then it's sort of up to you to choose what this.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of actually asking if there's a way where you can have enough Spirit to summon like all the available minions, kind of like a Lord of the Dead type of situation.
It should be possible if you spec correctly to be able to do that.
Okay.
The other thing with scepters, by the way, as a base type, is that all of the mods of them are all like does this to nearby allies.
I
so
see.
that means that scepters are a great, like they're sort of like a minion supporting thing, but also just like for auras and stuff like that.
Y las dagas y las otras cosas, ¿qué pasa
Templar,
entonces?
with like a flail in one hand and a scepter in the other, that's like a viable thing, or minions or whatever. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but
well, back to the other side of Spirit. I kind of wanted to know if there was a different design in auras, because in PoE 1 they have
defensivas y ofensivas.
It's really hard to use more than like 2, 3, maybe 4 if you're heavily invested, because now you obviously expect everyone to use some form of auras.
But you'll notice the cast on the trigger gems also reserve Spirit. So then the choice between triggering versus auras is now also a potential trade-off.
I see.
So there's other stuff going on. Like
Todo es como
really
Spirit
there are different, like entirely different styles of things you can use your Spirit for. So then it definitely feels like, I mean, obviously you can try to do more than one of those things by just getting more Spirit if that's what you want to do in your build. But it's still like, there's definitely a lot more sort of interesting options there about how to trade one off for the other.
Well, right now in PoE 1, you can get like an enormous amount of damage, or honestly, in some cases, all of your defensive capabilities through your auras.
Right.
Do you foresee having such
that can certainly
high power levels?
That can certainly be a way, right? Like once again, if you get I think the numbers right now is like you can get like you start with 100 Spirit and aura reserves 100 Spirit, but you can get like probably I shouldn't even quote me on these numbers. I think you can get like 600 Spirit from a scepter. So it's like you can still, if that's the way you want to go, you can go that way.
Okay.
I never want to be the kind of person who's just like, we're restricting everything, we don't want players to do it. No, like we want you to be able to, if you want to spec into something, you should be able to go hard on that thing and get like a lot of it, right? So
600 de espíritu.
I have a couple questions with the dodge roll. I guess let's tie the first one into the minion build. So right now in PoE 1, it's kind of swerving a little bit away from that, where there's a lot more active minion builds, but there's still passive minion builds. We still have skills like Righteous Fire, dot builds. There's a lot of time in between using skills.
Bueno, vamos a focusear esto.
Dodge roll in PoE 2. Do you foresee some builds they're just like non-stop dodging around the boss while doing passive damage?
I mean, it could be it could be something that you do, but I'm hoping that we can provide enough things. Like, I mean, ideally the balance produces the most.
Poner la marca y cosas así.
Okay, sure, you could just dodge roll around the boss and kill it eventually, but you're probably going to want to use, like, it's funny, I've actually had conversations with designers like, oh yeah, this is the only skill I'd ever use. And I'm like, okay, but then if you just did this, then it increase your damage with this and you get this effect. And like, oh yeah, you know what, I guess I'll just add that in too. And then you have that, and then they're like, oh yeah, but then if you added this skill, like now you'd be able to do this as well, and that would just, and it's like, oh yeah, well I guess I could use that skill too. It's like, we kind of want to promote the balance so that you always feel very much like, oh yeah, I just want to add this extra thing, and I just want to add this extra thing, and then pretty soon you've got like a whole ruckus of skills on your character that are all, that all have a purpose and all feel like they've got useful in certain situations. And especially with the way the skill system works now, we can have 9 6 links. There's it's okay to just have some skills that you just use rarely, right? That are just in the right situation, they're useful.
Well, I wanted to ask about that a little bit later, but since you're touching upon it, what determines the links on a skill gem?
Right. So basically, every gem when you first get it starts with 2 support sockets, and then you find a jeweler's a lesser jeweler's orb to add to go from 2 supports to 3 supports.
Okay.
And then there's a jeweler's to go from 3 to 4, and then a Grandmaster's, I can't remember the name of it, but
Okay.
Grandmaster's Jewels or something like that goes from,
Vale,
from
entonces hay
5,
currency
and then obviously
especial.
5 sockets in a gem is the same as a 6-link is in
Oh, I
PoE 1,
see.
so 5 supports one active. So basically you find those, and the one to go up to the 6-link equivalent is quite rare, like that's still the like chase thing, but instead of having like ridiculous numbers of fusings that you're dropping into an item, it's like, you know, you will just find one eventually, and then that's, you know, and because you want to 6-link all your items, they have to be common enough that you can, like, you know, getting the quest for all 6 links on your character is still like a thing that, you know, you're going to want to do, and you know, there's some
that sounds like a lot. So many more options when you're factoring
I
that
think
way.
so, yeah.
Well, they're going to do the gameplay demo, I think, in about 15 minutes. I think the PoE 2 gameplay demo is going to be Zizaran that tackles it the first time, so we'll see. Maybe he finds some of these items.
Yes, I think he might be able to, yes.
Okay, well, that should be pretty interesting.
Acto 3.
Backing into kind of the dodge system, so in Ruthless right now, they just have the dash. It's a very limiting movement skill.
Right. So this is very, very different from the dodge roll.
Yeah, and in PoE 2, we get the dodge roll, which is almost like a spammable version of it.
Sure.
And the skills themselves have a movement component, and it's not just for the melee characters, as you noted.
Sí, los
with
casteos también tenían.
Sorcerer, it kind of pushes you back a little bit if you want it to. This kind of brings up my question of, do we need skills like Flame Dash? Will there be strictly movement-based skills?
I don't personally feel that they're hugely necessary. Like, there should be enough mobility in just what you're doing that it feels okay.
Vale, entonces Whirling Blades y Flame Dash.
Or closes and like various other things. Like, depending on the skill, like obviously different archetypes are a bit different, but everyone, no matter what weapon you're using, will have some kind of access to like stuff that allows you to get around the battlefield quickly. It's just that like there's ways to do that where it feels natural without kind of making it so that it gets to this insane degree that things can sometimes get if you let it get out of control. So like, I mean, all the things like the, for example, like the monk's killing palm, you can go really far with that thing, but you have to go to an enemy. So it kind of inherently means that you kind of get the, like it works really well for mobility in combat without kind of making it so that you're just constantly going jing like everywhere, you know? Yeah, you kind of, we want to make it still feel right, and like intuitive and fun and mobile without kind of having that just like you're constantly spamming movement skills to the point where you can't even see what the hell you're doing, kind of thing.
Well, from the gameplay people will try out at Exilecon, and from the live demos that you will see, hopefully we'll get some opinions and see how people feel around it.
I mean, honestly, the major reason, like one of the huge things about dodge roll to me, like the biggest thing that I'm excited about is the dodge cancel, because what it means is that like just the whole like I'm not losing control of my character feeling is just a hugely really important thing. Once you've got that, it's very hard to go back. Like you've got just like there's no lock-in, there's none of that, and like it means also that we can make some skills that are slower because it's okay, right? Like in PoE 1 you cannot make a slow skill because if you did, it would just lock you in for so long. It would feel terrible.
They put it on a mind gem and fix it.
Yeah, like the ability to actually be able to use attack speed as a balanced tool again by having things like that, and also the redirect on like the ability to retarget skills as you cast them and stuff like that. It just really improves that kind of stuff. So it means that we can have fast skills.
Yeah, los slams a veces son muy duros.
Just unlocks that ability, and yeah.
I wanted to ask about the weapon swap system. It's more of like a dual weapon.
It is
system.
kind of a dual specking thing. Yes, it's yeah.
So you noted how you can get a lot of the power enabled just from having 2 weapons attributed individually to each of the skills, and the power that you unlock from the passive skill tree. But also the weapons just kind of seemed like more powerful in general, like getting a spammable skill on a Sork, getting the Unleash. It just seemed like there was possibly more weapon power. There's more power from your gear centered on your weapon than maybe PoE 1. Is that
there is a
goal?
little bit more balance in that direction. It's not like hugely. It's not like so. We thought that, like, so I think we sort of, so spellcasters, we tried to make the weapon a bit more of a focus. Like like spellcasters right now in PoE in PoE 1, like the weapon. I mean, obviously it matters, but it doesn't matter that much. Whereas we want to boot them. Now we still want to have the distinction between attack builds and caster builds, and the weapon still matters more on attacks than caster builds in PoE 1 and PoE 2 still. But we did want to get that focus up a little bit more, and at the same time we also wanted, and this is kind of a subtle thing that probably most people won't even notice, but we made it so that the skill gem level on attack skills also matters more on attacks as well, which in currently PoE 1 that really doesn't matter very much at all.
Some of them have like a flat damage component.
Yeah,
most
some of them do.
Most
We
of
actually,
them not so much.
I actually do have it as a goal to make it so that like most of the time you're going to want to use the higher level versions of things, and that's actually partly to make attribute requirements actually matter a little bit.
Y por los nuevos status
As
estos.
just a random side division, just by the way, talking about attribute requirements, the way that support gem attribute requirements work now is that the amount that the attributes that a support gem the attribute requirement for support gems is additive to the skill gem.
Oh.
So that means that if you're playing a Dex build and you want to use like 5 int supports, that actually becomes quite tricky now, based entirely on the attributes. We had to do it that way because we don't have the whole thing where you have to because there's not the off-color socket re-rolling mechanic anymore. There has to be some way to make it so that using off-class stuff is like a little bit harder. So because of the way that works now, the attribute requirements matter a little bit more for like you should be able to easily get the attributes for stuff that's on class, but the stuff that's off class is harder because the attributes sort of make it a bit harder.
Personally, I really like that because right now you have the limitation on number of skill gem links based on the items, which has its disadvantages, but now you're going away with that. You need other kinds of limitations to
Claro,
show
stats, está bien.
character power.
So,
I think it's a really clever way of doing it. I'm actually really happy to hear that.
Cool.
Another direction on this one. So we saw Alva show up in the demo. I'm sure this is still probably something you're discussing internally, so I'm not
Nico
sure
y los otros también.
are we expecting many familiar faces or league mechanics in PoE 2?
Well, I mean, for a start, as we've already said, certainly league mechanics, many of them will have revamped versions in PoE 2.
Okay.
Obviously, like, so the main problem, honestly, is like you see an old particle effect next to a new one, and it's like, okay, we have to update that. This is pretty much soon you're like, have to update it. Like all these things sort of go on. But absolutely, I mean, we are going to be like canon correct as far as like the ages of people with regard to PoE 1 versus PoE 2. But Alva is a time traveler, so we get away with a bit more there.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
So one thing that has actually, in my opinion, really defined Path of Exile and kind of pushed the RPG genre is the different game modes in which you can play new content in equally. So you've
como Delve or Blight.
Softcore, but we also have Solo Self-Found. Now we have Ruthless, which is very exciting for me personally. I'm a Ruthless enjoyer personally. Will these game modes continue on in PoE 2?
So we're certainly going to have hardcore.
Okay.
We're certainly going to have solo self-found. I don't see why we wouldn't. Ruthless probably shouldn't be necessary. I mean, I'm sure there'll come a point, like once the balance of PoE 2 becomes ridiculous over 10 years, where we'll be like, oh crap, we need to have like a thing for old school Path of Exile 2 players to enjoy or something like that. But for now, I don't think that we would need it. But definitely, the thing is, we don't want to split the community too much because you want like people to be able to actually, like have people to play with and all that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously not for solo self-found, which is why it kind of can exist as a thing. But don't want to split it too much. But certainly hardcore and solo self-found are absolutely going to be there.
When I heard the announcement that PoE 2 was going to be a separate game from PoE 1, initially it's exciting, and then it's like, but wait. And then you say the microtransactions that you have, the skins, they kind of follow into PoE 2. And I mean, that's really fantastic. That's a really clever way of doing it and keeping them separate games.
And it's worth mentioning, it to me, the more exciting thing is honestly the future, like the fact you can buy stuff that made after PoE 2 comes out and have it in PoE 1 again, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, like, I want to, and the reason we're doing all that stuff is I really want to make sure that people feel like, it's like we want to make sure that our company doesn't feel incentivized to abandon PoE 1, and by making it so that we have this policy, it means that we're always PoE 1 will always be a thing that's important to us, because it's not like just some random product in the back corner which no one cares about. Like, it's actually a thing that has supporter packs and there's things you can get, and people actually want to that's actually a thing. So yeah, I just want to make sure that our company does sort of still not do PoE 1 dirty. It needs to sort of have a good future as well, in my opinion.
Well, it seems pretty good to me. I'm excited to play next league. But I guess the follow-up to that, the one thing that I was a little bit worried of, if I end up liking PoE 2 way more, and I don't, I'm still in play PoE 1, but if I end up playing PoE 2 a lot more than I play PoE 1, which I think is
I would hope so, being the director of PoE 2.
The race rewards, I'd love to be able to at least use their skins in PoE 2. Have you thought of doing anything like that?
Well, so basically anything in the microtransaction stash is something you'll be able to use. So it would depend on whether or not at some point Chris gets around to implementing the thing where you can pull them off and turn them into a skin. If that's the case, then sure, it'll work in PoE 2. Because that's anything in the micro stash, that's what comes over.
All right. Well, we are going to jump into the the gameplay for PoE 2 very soon here with Zizeran. I think if we have just another quick second, I'd maybe ask you, what's your favorite power fantasy in an ARPG, and have you made it yet in PoE 2?
That's a really hard question because you're basically saying
you got 30 seconds.
Oh Jesus Christ! I always hate these ones because it's like, you know, we made all these classes and but I think probably like one of the main reasons that we went with the whole like 2 classes per attribute combination thing was because of the druid. It's like we wanted to have a druid and there just wasn't a class that it made sense for, and we're like, okay, we have to find a way to make it so a druid can be a thing. That's what we came up with.
All right, well, I hope you nailed it. Thank you so much for watching, guys.
Yeah,
we'll see you in a second.